Imagine dedicating your entire life to building a sanctuary for your family, sacrificing your own comfort to give them everything, only to discover they are quietly waiting for your expiration date. This is the heartbreaking true story of a devoted widow who opened her doors to her struggling niece and nephew-in-law, assuming they just needed a safe place to land. But what these entitled relatives didn't know was that the woman they casually plotted to exploit was about to turn their cruel betrayal into a masterclass of silent, absolute justice. Let me introduce you to Martha. She is a 68-year-old widow who lost her beloved husband, Charles, nearly a decade ago. Martha never had biological children of her own. She and Charles had tried for years, but life simply had other plans. Instead, they poured all their love and energy into building their forever home together. It was a beautiful two-story house with red shutters and a cozy porch swing that Charles had hung up himself. It was meant to be their forever place, safe, quiet, and completely theirs. When Martha's younger sister passed away unexpectedly, Martha stepped in without a moment of hesitation to raise her granddaughter, Madison. Madison was just a wild-eyed, grieving teenager at the time, and Martha became everything from her legal guardian to her guidance counselor. Taking care of Madison was Martha's deeply personal way of honoring her late sister's memory. She gave up her own weekend getaways and retirement plans to ensure the young girl never felt the painful sting of abandonment. She put Madison through school, proudly watched her graduate, and even helped pay for her wedding. To Martha, Madison was her family, the absolute closest thing she had to a daughter. So, when Madison and her husband, Tyler, hit a rough financial patch last year, Martha's maternal instincts immediately kicked in. Tyler had lost his job, and Madison was between contracts, leaving them desperate for a place to regroup. Martha opened her doors without a second thought, generously giving them the master bedroom while she moved her own belongings into the smaller guest room. She happily sacrificed her own peace, cooking their meals, cleaning up around them, and even fixing the broken dishwasher herself. But it did not take long before the atmosphere in the home began to shift. Subtle red flags began to appear, masked as innocent conversations. Tyler started making passive-aggressive, backhanded comments about how the house needed fresh energy or how Martha's generation simply didn't believe in open space. Madison casually suggested tearing down the custom bookshelf that Charles had built himself and painting over the soft green walls Martha and Charles had lovingly chosen together. Tyler even once looked around the living room and muttered, "This will look great once we redo it." At first, Martha brushed these comments off, assuming they were just nesting. When you love someone like your own child, you will willingly swallow 1,000 tiny cuts before you realize you are bleeding. The final, fatal wound came late one night, nearly midnight, shattering everything Martha wanted to believe about family loyalty. Martha had been upstairs reading when she realized she had left her tea mug down in the living room. Not wanting to disturb the sleeping couple, she walked downstairs quietly, barefoot against the floorboards. As she turned the corner toward the kitchen, she suddenly froze. She heard their voices, not the stressed voices of a struggling couple, but the casual, cruel laughter of two people plotting. "She doesn't even know what's coming," Madison giggled. "She won't last much longer," Tyler added, his tone as cold and hard as steel. Martha stopped breathing as the ultimate betrayal hung in the air. Then, the sentence that would change all of their lives was spoken clearly into the dark. "We're just using her till the house is ours." Both of them laughed. Martha stood alone in the dark hallway, clutching the banister as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. She wasn't angry yet, nor was she shocked. She just felt entirely hollow, as if all the air had been pulled from the room. She stepped back silently so the floorboards wouldn't betray her presence, and crept back upstairs to her room. She had opened her home and given them comfort, and in return, they had written her expiration date in whispers. But as she sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, they had no idea that they had just awakened a woman who was wide awake and ready to teach them what it meant to mistake silence for surrender. In the immediate wake of their devastating words, Lillian did not react with explosive anger or shock. Instead, she felt entirely hollow, as if the air had been pulled from the room. Afraid that the floorboards would betray her presence, she stepped back silently into the shadows. She crept back upstairs, closed her bedroom door, and sat on the edge of her bed for what felt like hours. Her mind began to spiral, replaying every past conversation and every small red flag she had previously chosen to ignore. She remembered the casual way Madison had once asked if the house's deed had been updated. She thought of Tyler looking around her living room and muttering that it would look great once they redid it, along with his passive-aggressive remarks about younger families making better use of the space. After she had opened her home to provide them comfort, they had repaid her by whispering her expiration date. Lillian spent the night staring sleeplessly at the ceiling as a storm she never saw coming settled in her chest. At 5:10 a.m., just before the birds began to sing, she went up to the cold attic and pulled down an old wooden box that held her most vital documents. The attic's chill felt like memory itself, frozen into the taped boxes and wooden beams. She had not opened this chest since her husband, Charles, passed away. Now it called to her like a lighthouse cutting through the fog of her anger. Inside, she found his will, their mortgage papers, and the official deed to the house. Her hands trembled as she opened it, but her mind was suddenly sharper than it had been in years. Her relatives thought they were waiting on a dying woman to hand them a house, but Lillian was wide awake and ready to show them what it meant to mistake silence for surrender. Beneath an old photo album, she found the house papers exactly where she remembered leaving them, securely tucked next to a sealed envelope bearing her name in Charles's handwriting. Lillian set the envelope aside for later and pulled out the deed. It was right there in black and white. She was the sole owner, with no joint title and no power of attorney assigned to anyone else. No one could take this from her. The realization brought her a strange clarity rather than rage or revenge. That house was built on love, hope, and sweat. She and Charles had installed every fixture together, saved every penny to afford the custom porch, and planted the magnolia tree in the front yard. Yet, in her blind generosity, she had handed the keys over to people who saw her home as nothing more than a future property grab. Madison and Tyler clearly did not know the story of the home or respect her sacrifices. After Lillian's sister, Valerie, passed away, Lillian had taken care of Madison to honor Valerie's memory. She had paid for her school supplies, attended parent-teacher conferences, and given up her weekend getaways and retirement plans so Madison would never feel abandonment. Lillian had willingly swallowed 1,000 tiny cuts, like Madison claiming a missing heirloom necklace was simply misplaced, or Tyler telling a neighbor that they would eventually own the house because Lillian had no kids, because she loved her niece. However, their cruel midnight confession was the final wound. As morning broke, Lillian sat quietly in her kitchen with the deed in one hand and her coffee untouched. The golden light streamed through the window exactly the way Charles used to love it. Seeking guidance, she finally opened Charles's letter, which she had been too broken and lost to read for the past 9 years. Inside the neat handwriting, one line stood out like a torch in the dark. If you ever find yourself surrounded by people who forget who you are, walk away. You've already given them enough. Tears slipped down her cheek, representing grief but also newfound freedom. For the first time in years, she stopped asking what others needed from her and asked what she needed for herself, deciding she needed out immediately. By the time the sun fully rose, Lillian had packed the foundational truths of what was hers. Her vital documents, the ironclad deed, and Charles's clear will leaving everything to her. That morning, she made quiet phone calls and reached out to Michael, a discreet and trusted real estate agent who had helped a friend sell property off-market. Without flinching, Michael told her he had a cash buyer, an older couple looking to downsize from the city and retire in the country. Lillian gave him one strict condition: do not list it and do not post photos, just let her know when they were ready. When Michael confirmed they had been waiting for a house like hers and were already ready, Lillian smiled, feeling sharper than she had in months. While Madison and Tyler were still sound asleep, Lillian moved quietly through the house, carefully gathering only what she truly needed. She packed her important vital papers, Charles's folded military flag, and her wedding ring, which she had stopped wearing when the arthritis in her knuckles made it too tight. She also took a single, cherished photo of her and Charles standing in front of their newly built porch, holding glasses of lemonade and looking like their future would never run out. She deliberately left behind the heavy furniture, the linens, and even the beautiful crystal set Madison had once admired, because absolutely none of that mattered anymore. It was funny to her how much love you can put into building something, and how easily people who were born decades after its foundation think they are completely entitled to it. The house had been a true home when it was full of love, but now it was just a target for people who had forgotten how to care. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Michael arrived at the property with the cash buyers. They were a kind, older couple. She was a retired teacher, and her husband was a former mechanic who now spent his time gardening full-time. Their eyes didn't roam the place like vultures looking for a quick flip. Instead, they looked at the house like it was sacred. They asked absolutely nothing of Lillian. There was no haggling and no pressure. When the notary arrived at noon, Lillian signed the official sale documents with a hand steadier than she ever expected. Michael handed her a check along with a manila envelope containing all the finalized paperwork. And then, just like that, it was no longer her house. It felt terrifying, like letting go of a lifeline, but it also felt incredibly liberating, like stepping straight out of a cage. Before she walked out the door for the last time, she left a note on the kitchen counter. She didn't scribble it on a careless sticky note. She took a sheet of her very best stationery, wrote with her favorite pen, and folded it neatly next to a small framed photo of her late sister Valerie holding baby Madison. The note read, "To those who plan their future without me in it, I hope you find what you're looking for. This home was built with love, but it cannot survive entitlement. You were waiting for it to be yours. It never was. Lillian." She didn't wait around to see their faces when they read it. Lillian got into her car and drove away without any music playing, listening only to the hum of her tires against the old country roads and the rising certainty in her chest that she had done the right thing. By 2:00 p.m., she had successfully checked into a small rental cabin by the lake, the exact same one she and Charles used to visit when they were younger. She turned off her phone for the first time in weeks, sat on the front porch, and whispered to no one, "I'm not theirs to use." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. The next morning, Lillian woke up barely at dawn, having slept well for the first time in months. It wasn't because the lumpy cabin bed was softer, but because her heart simply wasn't clenched anymore. Back at the house, she knew Tyler would probably still be snoring, and Madison, who falsely claimed to be a morning person, wouldn't be up before 9:30 a.m. She didn't have to wonder long about when they would notice her absence. At exactly 9:06 a.m., her phone vibrated with 8 missed calls from Madison and a frantic text asking where she and her car were. By 9:12 a.m., Tyler texted to ask if the weird envelope on the counter with their names on it was some kind of joke. Lillian took a long sip of her tea and let the messages sit. By 9:15 a.m., her phone lit up like fireworks with messages asking if she was insane and screaming that she couldn't just leave. She turned off the screen, knowing full well that she absolutely could, and she already had. At 9:42 a.m., the landline inside the cabin rang, and the second Lillian picked up, she recognized Madison's voice. Her niece's tone had completely changed from vinegar to sugar, desperately trying to claim there had been a misunderstanding. Madison tried to gaslight her, suggesting they just thought the house was getting to be a lot for her and that they were simply trying to help. Lillian remained perfectly silent as Madison pleaded, "You've been like a mother to me. You raised me. This house, it's the only home I've ever known." Lillian finally spoke with calm, devastating precision. Exactly. It was a home until it became a calculation. There was a sharp inhale on the line as Madison realized the horrifying truth. Lillian had heard them that night. When Madison accused her of selling the house without saying a word, Lillian replied, "I said plenty. You just weren't listening." For the first time in her life, Madison Carter had absolutely no words, and Lillian gently ended the call, not in anger, but in complete peace. That very afternoon, Michael texted to confirm the new buyers were moving in within the week, meaning Madison and Tyler legally had until Friday to vacate the premises, with absolutely no extensions. The sale was final, and Lillian was finally free. By evening, the reality of the finalized sale began to crush the entitled couple, and Lillian received a desperate voicemail from Tyler. He didn't yell. Instead, he begged her to call him back, claiming they didn't mean it and that it was just private talk. But Lillian had already made her choice. Standing on the cabin's porch, she read Charles's letter again, whispering the final line like a prayer. "When the time comes, choose peace. Choose yourself." She hadn't burned any bridges. She had simply built a door and walked straight through it. The next morning, she drove into town to visit a little diner she and Charles used to love. The waitress, Carla, remembered her, and upon hearing that Lillian had moved on, slid a warm slice of peach pie across the table and smiled, saying, "Good for you." While Madison and Tyler were losing their minds over losing the house, Lillian found a beautiful new rhythm. She enrolled in a flower arranging class at the local community center, making friends with women who were sharp and bold. She also met James, her new neighbor 3 cabins down, a retired firefighter with a crooked smile and an old hound named Murphy. James became a gentle, steady presence who brought her firewood when it got cold and never pushed for painful details about her past. Meanwhile, Madison was spiraling online, writing dramatic social media posts about elderly manipulation and posting photos of herself pouting like a victim. However, the internet saw right through her deception. One commenter sharply shut Madison down by replying, "My grandma gave me everything, too. I never forgot it. You clearly did." About 2 weeks after moving, Lillian received an official letter from an attorney. Madison and Tyler were actively trying to contest the home's sale, falsely claiming undue influence and stating Lillian wasn't of sound mind. Lillian simply laughed out loud. Her hired attorney, a sharp woman named Michelle, had completely anticipated this exact move. Michelle had recorded everything and compiled letters, proof, and witnesses, making the contract absolutely airtight. Calling Lillian that afternoon, Michelle confidently declared, "They've got nothing. Let them throw their tantrum." Friday, the final move-out deadline, arrived faster than the greedy couple expected. A neighborhood friend named Sharon sent Lillian a picture of Madison and Tyler standing on the curb beside a pathetic heap of boxes and trash bags. Tyler looked to be mid-argument, while Madison was holding her phone like a weapon, screaming into it. The new buyers officially moved in the following week and sent Lillian a handwritten thank you card, with the woman expressing, "I've never felt safer in a place." Then came a twisting moment Lillian almost saw coming. One afternoon, Tyler pulled into her gravel driveway looking entirely deflated, carrying a manila envelope. He handed it to Lillian, revealing printed photographs of Madison wrapping her arms around another man in hotel lobbies and restaurants. A broken Tyler admitted that Madison thought he was boring and only married him because he was safe, banking on the fact that Lillian's house would eventually give them the life she truly wanted. Realizing that his wife didn't just use Lillian, but used everyone, Tyler didn't expect forgiveness. Lillian looked at him without hatred or pity, only clarity. She quietly advised him, "You get one life, Tyler. Don't waste it chasing what doesn't belong to you." He nodded, said nothing else, and left for good. A little over a year later, Lillian's life is filled with peaceful rituals. She spends her afternoons volunteering at the local library and enjoys the steady company of James and Murphy. Madison never wrote or called again, but Lillian didn't care. She hadn't acted out of revenge, she did it for her own release. Today, there is a framed copy of Charles's life-saving letter near her door. Every morning she walks past it and remembers exactly who she is. She is not just a widow or someone to be leaned on until they get what they want. She is the woman who walked away, who gave love until it was twisted, and then chose herself. When her family coldly whispered that they were just using her, they didn't know they were handing her a door. And Lillian didn't slam it, she closed it, locked it, and planted flowers on the other side. The valuable lesson for the listener. Lillian's story is a profound reminder that true kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. Key takeaways to remember. Do not mistake silence for surrender. When you love your family, you may willingly swallow 1,000 tiny cuts before realizing you are bleeding. However, recognizing that you are being used is the first powerful step to taking your life back. You don't owe anyone your peace. Just because you have a history with someone or share a bloodline does not mean they are entitled to your future, your assets, or your mental health. Choose yourself. As Charles's letter beautifully stated, if you ever find yourself surrounded by people who forget who you are, walk away. You've already given them enough. Healing doesn't always require a loud confrontation or a dramatic fight. Sometimes, the most devastating and effective boundary you can set is simply removing your presence and closing the door.